Happy New Year, everybody. It's Jeff Zito, and thanks for checking out another episode of the Celebrity Jobber Podcast. This is one of the top shows on the Apple Podcast Music Interviews chart, and I urge you to go back and check out some of our past guests up on CelebrityJobber.com. Streaming on all platforms, whether it's Spotify or Apple Podcast, wherever you listen to podcasts. Please subscribe. Would love a 5-star rating and leave a review. That's right. It's very important. And I thank you very much for doing that for me. So here's my first guest of the new year. And I got to tell you, pretty cool guy. And I'm not just saying he's a cool guy because, I talked to him and he was nice to me. No, I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this guy, super cool. I mean, just think of the biggest song of the last 10 or 12 years. It belonged to Robin Thicke. And of course, you can't forget the video for the song Blurred Lines. Had all those supermodels in there, and almost 1 billion views right now on YouTube for that song. I remember it was the biggest song of the summer of, I believe, 2013. Humongous song. But what about before that song? Who was Robin Thicke? I'm sure you know Robin's father, Alan Thicke, Canadian actor. He played the father in the 80s sitcom Growing Pains, which was a humongous show at the time. But I'm not sure if you know that his mother was also a very successful singer-actress. Robin's mother, Gloria Loring, she played the role of Liz Chandler on Days of Our Lives and had a huge hit song back in 1986, which was a duet with Carl Anderson, the song called Friends and Lovers. And if you YouTube that, you'll automatically be transported back in time. And you'll be like, oh yeah, remember this song. So a little bit of backstory on Robin Thicke. His parents were famous, but kind of interesting the path that Robin chose and how things actually happened for him. We'll find out what his first job was. Definitely not the typical first job, I'd say. What led him to being a singer and maybe not being in TV like both of his parents. Or maybe he's planning on doing that. And there is a big break involved. He wasn't just born into a famous family and then boom, he's a famous artist. No, there's a big break involved, and we'll get to that as well. Robin Thicke is my guest this week on Celebrity Jobber.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. If you like what you hear, please subscribe, give a 5-star rating, and leave a review. Check out all our past episodes on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you pod. What if these celebrities weren't famous? What would they have become? What was their first job? We're about to find out.
Hey, Robin.
Hey, Jeff. How you doing, buddy?
I'm great.
I'm well, thank you.
Yeah, right on, man. I was excited to talk to you, man. There's so much that I have for you and so little time. Plus, I wanted to get to the Masked Singer, and so we'll go as quickly as we possibly can. But with a mom and a dad so successful in the TV business, what made you want to get into music? Was it someone in music that you wanted to be just like? Or, how come you weren't the next Mike Seaver?
Well, there's still time.
All right, okay.
No, my mom was a singer and songwriter first. She became an actress on Days of Our Lives because of her singing voice. And my dad, a lot of people might not know, was also a songwriter and singer. He wrote the Different Strokes theme song, Facts of Life theme song. My mom sang Facts of Life. My dad sang Different Strokes. Now the world don't move. That's my dad. So I come from... And not just that, but I come from 6 generations of musicians. My grandfather was a trumpet player. His father was a jazz trumpet player. My great-grandmother used to play piano in the silent movies. So we used to have traveling bands, like a family traveling bands, like The Sound of Music. I literally come from both sides of music, history.
Right.
It came very naturally to me. You
do not have the voice of the theme song of Different Strokes, though. You have, if I didn't know who you were, I would say, this is a black guy, for sure. I mean, you got such a different kind of... Where did that voice come from? Who was it that you really loved when you were a kid that maybe you tried to emulate, but who knows? How did you
well,
get
I think
that
it
voice?
was just soul music, soul singers. My mom was a very soulful lady, and my dad was too. My mom's number one song in the '80s was with a black R&B singer. So it's no coincidence. I come from the DNA of soulful white people.
Right.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. Celebrity Jobber.
What about I know with such a long career, right? And I could tell you when you became, the biggest song in the country that summer, the biggest song on the radio, the biggest song on MTV. But was there a particular big break that you look at, something that kind of happened to you, a meeting with someone?
One word, Oprah.
Tell me about that.
It was I remember the evolution of Robin Thicke, where I Lost Without You had gone to number one, the album was number one, and Oprah had me on her show, and the sales just spiked, and then she had me on again a month later, which was very unheard of for Oprah, and that's when it kind of cemented, and I started to say to myself, I guess I'm not crazy.
Wow.
I guess we're not so bad at this. But yeah, it was Oprah's seal of approval in her heyday was that was the clincher.
That is so amazing. She's had that effect on so many people. Jesus.
Exactly.
And Robin, tell me a little bit about when Blurred Lines came out. Did your life change immediately after that became like the biggest song of the summer?
Yeah, I mean, it was, I remember we did The Voice, and when The Voice was the number one show on TV, and it was me and Pharrell and T.I., we all performed on The Voice. The day after the performance, the song went from like 150 on the charts to number 25, and then a few days later, it was number one. And so it was the performance on The Voice that really just triggered this explosion. And then after that, you go your whole life saying, oh, I want to be a big star, and I'm going to make great music, and I want to be a great artist. And then all of a sudden it happens, and it's very overwhelming. And I don't know who is prepared for it, but
yeah,
it's definitely a life-changing experience when you're number one in 120 countries. Things do change overnight.
I bet they do, and I bet that video didn't hurt, right?
Yeah. I don't know if anybody remembers me from the video, to be honest.
I don't really, yeah. Absolutely right.
The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito. Celebrity Jobber.
So what about your very first job, Robin? Can you think of before even music or anything outside of show business? What was your very first job, first paycheck?
Well, to be honest, I was a signed songwriter and producer at 16 years old. I had a publishing deal, I had a record deal, and I was a professional songwriter and producer at 16. So that was my first job.
That's amazing.
I started very young.
16 years old. That was your very first job.
My first song that I wrote and produced was on Brandy's debut album, which sold 8 million copies. And she was 14 and I was 15 when we were recording her vocals. And so from that moment on, I was a published and working songwriter and producer. And then I became an artist many years later, releasing my first album. But there was about 10 years there of me writing and producing for other number one artists.
That's so cool. So you never had a paper route. You never worked in the mall. The first gig you had was as a record producer and a songwriter when you were 16.
Exactly. Yeah, I moved out and lived on my own at 17. Yeah, I got started very early.
Was mom and dad supportive? Even though they were in the business, they probably knew all the pitfalls and stuff like that to help you steer away from, the bad part of the business. So were they supportive?
Yeah, I mean, they were very supportive, but also, like you said, weary of, everything else that comes with it. But my dad was just the coolest, and my mom is a wonderful, wonderful supporter, and they always, have had my back. But I remember my dad, being weary about me moving out and doing this and that, and then years later, he was the first one to be backstage,
right on,
at every show and follow me around the world, and we party together, and he was just the best.
So we talked a little bit about how come you didn't go in the direction of TV, and you kind of joked about how you still might. You never know. I mean, you've been in so many different movies.
Well, doing The Masked Singer, yeah, I mean, the two things, like doing The Real Husbands of Hollywood with Kevin Hart and doing The Masked Singer really changed my personality because I used to take myself very seriously. I was like, I'm a serious artist, and everyone's going to know how serious of an artist I am, and I'm going to be the opposite of my dad, and this and this and that. And then it turns out that I love doing television, and I love doing comedy, and I would welcome any more opportunities that are in that world. Absolutely.
So speaking of The Masked Singer, how did you get involved?
You know what? It's a great story. So I saw Ryan Reynolds dressed in a unicorn costume singing "Tomorrow, Tomorrow" on and it went viral, and because he was promoting Deadpool 2. And literally a couple days later, my manager calls me and says, "Hey, there's this show in South Korea called The Masked Singer, and they're going to do a version in America, and would you be interested?" And I said, "I just saw Ryan Reynolds in a unicorn costume
Right.
tomorrow," and I was dying laughing. So I thought that the concept itself was genius. And, it's one of those things where you're like, okay, this is either going to be a big success or a big flop, but you got to roll the dice in this world, And so honestly, it's been nothing but a blessing to me and my family, and I love doing the show. I love showing up for work. I love Nick and Ken and Jenny and Rita and everyone I get to work with. It's really just an awesome experience, and it never gets old.
You get to hang out with Donnie at all? Does Donnie, Jenny McCarthy's husband, Donnie Wahlberg, hang
Donnie
out?
Well, you might not know this, but when I was 16, the main person that I was working for was Jordan Knight on his debut solo album. I produced and wrote 6 songs on Jordan Knight from New Kids on the Block on his solo album. And so I spent a lot of time with Donnie, because Donnie and Jordan, of course, were buddies, and Donnie and I did a song together on Jordan's debut album. So I've known Donnie since I was 16.
Wow, that's so amazing how some of you guys have been around for so long and have such a relationship just throughout the years. It's just kind of a crazy thing. Tell me a little bit, Robin, about The Masked Singer and the finale. Is there going to be any? I mean, obviously there's going to be surprises. You're not going to be able to tell me about them, I know, but tell me what. Tell me what you can tell me.
I will say that we have our season 5 winner Piglet, Nick Lachey, will be performing a wonderful holiday song tonight, and then we get to find out who the Wasp and the Buffaloes are. I have a pretty good feeling I know who one of them are.
Okay,
but I think this season has really been one of our most talented vocal seasons that we've ever had. I mean, we've got some incredible vocalists in the finale,
and I would imagine some holiday performances, of course.
Yeah, we got Piglet. Nick Lachey is back. he's gonna rock it for us.
Celebrity Jobber. The Celebrity Jobber Podcast with Jeff Zito.
What do you think? What's next, Robin? Do you have anything, in the hopper ready to go when The Masked Singer raps? What do you got?
Well, I've got a new album coming out next year. A lot of new music to record. I had 3 kids in 3 years, and then my house burned down in the Malibu fires years ago. So we were kind of shuffling for a little while, and then once we got the new house and the kids now in daycare, and I finally have a little more time to focus on music. So I'm really excited about all the new music I'm going to be releasing next year.
The Masked Singer on Fox, and Robin Thicke. Really appreciate it. Real pleasure speaking with you, man. Was a real big fan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Jeff. I really appreciate it, man. Thanks for having me on.
Okay, so Robin's dad, Alan Thicke. I knew that he was the dad on Growing Pains back in the 80s, one of my favorite shows. And I did know that he was like kind of in the TV theme song business. I did hear that before, but I wasn't aware that was his voice on Different Strokes. He wrote that song. He said he wrote The Facts of Life, and Robin's mother, Gloria Loring, sang that song. Famous mom and dad, kind of, not superstars, but I think Alan Thicke towards the end of the 80s became a pretty big star. And then, of course, somebody like my mother that's big into the stories and the soap operas, Gloria Loring, definitely, kind of big in that world, in that community. But I definitely remember the hit song from Robin's mother back in the mid-80s, and it was called Friends and Lovers. As I told you in the beginning of this, go ahead and Google that or YouTube it, and you'll be like, oh, Oh, yeah. I remember this song. So you figure with, somewhat famous parents, Robin would have an easy time breaking into this business, which he didn't, although his first job was as a writer-producer. And I think he said he was 15 years old when he wrote and produced for Brandy's first album. Now, listen, you got famous parents. They might know who to call and the right people to meet and whatnot. But if you're getting hired as a songwriter/producer at the age of 15, you've got to have a little bit of talent, or shall I say a lot of bit of talent. And that was Robin's direction from the very beginning. He said music has been in his family forever, but didn't shun the idea of TV, as he mentioned The Real Husbands of Hollywood he was in with Kevin Hart, and of course what he's doing nowadays with The Masked Singer. And his big break I thought was very interesting. Like so many, he said one word, Oprah, and she's done it for a lot of people, but had him on a couple of times, and he said that was life-changing for him. Not to mention the time he performed his song Blurred Lines on The Voice with T.I. and Pharrell, and mentioned that was a pretty life-changing experience, what happened with that song then after. And I thought it was interesting that he said, your whole life, you're an artist, you're trying to get famous, you're trying to get that big break, that big song, and when it happens so fast, you're not ready for it, and it was pretty overwhelming. I thought that was pretty interesting, and definitely can understand what he's talking about. And a pretty nice guy, Robin Thicke, my guest this week on Celebrity Jobber, first of the new year, but 120 episodes to choose from up on CelebrityJobber.com, one of the top shows on the Apple Podcast Music Interviews charts. So please go back and check out some past guests. You can also go to CelebrityJobber.com, and please subscribe, whether it's Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. We're streaming on all the platforms. Also, you can follow on IG, which is celebrity_jobber_podcast, and youtube.com/the@CelebrityJobber. Well, thanks so much for checking out another episode. I wish you a happy and healthy 2025, and I'll see you next week with another episode of Celebrity Jobber. Thanks again. I'm Jeff Zito.